Morning.
Morning.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to our 50th episode. And in honour of that, we are, as ever, in search of the truth. And we are doing a Black Lives Matter episode. So we are both wearing black. With that in mind, Black Lives Matter, random blam, go.
This is our Black Lives Matter random blam.
It is.
So, random blam for you. And I didn't know this either. But you might know it. The Black Lives Matter hashtag started in 2012 after a love letter of sorts was posted on Facebook following the death of 17-year-old Travion Martin, who was killed walking home from the shops after buying a packet of Skittles.
Oh.
He was completely unarmed, was completely unprovoked. George Zimmerman, who was out doing a neighbourhood watch, felt that Travion was out of place in the middle class area. He shot and killed Travion. He got away with it, basically. He didn't have any punishment at all. And so the Facebook post was posted by someone called Alicia, and it was titled "Love Letter to Black Folks," and it reads, "We don't deserve to be killed with impunity. We need to love ourselves and fight for a world where Black lives matter. Black people, I love you. I love us. We matter. Our lives matter." And then from that post, the hashtag Black Lives Matter quickly took off.
Wow. I did not know that.
Oh, me either.
That's cool. It's great. I love when, because I mean, this is going to be an episode and it's my episode. I've written it all out and researched and everything, but it's just another like Matthew Shepard where
I can't explain it.
Just infuriates me.
Yeah.
Absolutely infuriates me. And yeah, to the point where I'm quite ashamed of being white.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like,
completely
I just think, oh God, why did you guys have to be like that?
Let the team down.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as knowledge goes on, Black Lives Matter, I think that I'm late to the party. I don't think that I've got enough information as I should have, but I'm on it. I'm learning. But my Black Lives Matter random blam is just some facts about racism in general. In New York, 88% of police stops were black people and only 10% were white.
Yeah,
which is
that sounds accurate.
Yeah, scummy. On average, black men in the US receive sentences that are 19.1% longer than those of white men convicted for the same crimes.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it's rank, isn't it? Racial hate crimes reported in the UK. It just shows that it's just not heading in the right direction. Even now, we think that we're sort of so advanced and, we're really making progress. We're actually not. Racial hate crimes reported in the UK in 2011 was 35,944.
Gosh.
Then I've skipped, because I got the stats for every year.
Mm-hmm.
Skipped forward to 2017, more than doubled to 71,264. Wow. And in 2021, the racial hate crimes reported in the UK were 109,843.
Jeez.
So it's just going up and up and up and up. Yeah. The curve literally just went straight up in a big arc, and that's not the way that we want to see it going. We want to see it curving down. In 2022, going into 2023, racial hate crimes were coming in at a high rate in Greater London area, with the highest amount of 19,586. The West Midlands had 8,897 reported cases, and in our area, Essex, where we both grew up, we had 2,971. And what surprised me, and it may surprise you, that the city of London, so the bit right in the middle, actually came in at the lowest with just 130. And I say just 130 is still 130 too many.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That just really surprised me. I thought, blimey, City of London had the lowest at 130 when Greater London, so that's places like, Dagenham, Romford, it's now gone into like Brentwood. I think that's on the cusp of, Greater London. But yeah, how can you go from like 19,586 all in the Greater London area, and then right in the city centre of London, 130? Mind-boggling. Right, Black Lives Matter, random blams, done. Okay, so today's episode obviously comes with a trigger warning. We cover a great deal about, obviously, racism, and there are some graphic descriptions of violence. I warn you now, I will also briefly talk about the brutal murder of a baby. So if it's not something you want to hear, then maybe skip this episode. But I beg that you don't, because these horrors need to be heard and processed in order to ensure that this disgusting racism stops. So I understand that it's uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable doing the research for this story. And it's put me in a bit of a funny headspace for the time that I've been doing it. And I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going with this case. I'm going to look into it more. But yeah, this is a story that I feel very passionate about. I do not believe, because it's a controversial one. There's one side and then there's another side. Some people think it was an accident. Some people think that it was murder. I believe it was murder. I am 99.9% certain that this was murder. I can't say 100% because I wasn't there. I have tried to write this story being unbiased and neutral, and then I thought, no, why should I? This is how I feel, and this is me speaking, so I am going to say it the way I think and the way I feel about it. You are obviously all entitled to your own opinions and feelings. If you feel differently to me, let us know. If you feel the same as me, let us know. But maybe this is an episode that we can do a discussion on in the future, because I'm going to keep going with it, like I said. Without further ado, this is the tragic story of Kendrick Johnson. I used to feel very differently about this case when I think a good few years ago I listened to some podcasts on it, and I kind of came away with it thinking it's just an accident. It sounds obvious. For those of you that don't know, obviously I'm going to go into the story, but it's the story of a 17-year-old African-American who was found deceased inside a gym mat in his high school. And the police said that he was reaching for his gym shoes and he got stuck and couldn't get out and he died. And I took that for exactly what it was. Having looked into it and done some research, I have completely done a 180. I do not feel like that anymore. I think this was murder. And
yeah, there's a lot of controversial or conflicting evidence and information, isn't there? So this would be a great one.
There is. So I'm going to start by giving you some background on the area that this took place. And this was something that I was unaware of. Val Dosta, Georgia, like many other cities in the United States, it has a long history of racism and racial discrimination. The city's history is intertwined with the broader history of racism in the American South. During the era of slavery, Val Dosta was a plantation town, and the local economy relied heavily on the labour of enslaved African Americans. Slavery was deeply ingrained into the social fabric of the city, with white residents holding racist beliefs and attitudes towards the African Americans. After the Civil War, the abolition of slavery, Val Dosta, like other southern cities, implemented a system of racial segregation known as Jim Crow. Have you heard of Jim Crow?
Nope.
See, I've heard of Jim Crow, but I've never realised what it was until I was reading up on it. And I thought, oh, is that what Jim Crow is? Implemented a system of racial segregation known as Jim Crow.
Oh, okay.
So the system enforced strict racial separation in public spaces, such as schools, parks, and transportation. African Americans were subjected to discriminatory laws and practices, including voter suppression, limited access to education and healthcare, and economic inequality. So Mary Turner was a prominent figure in the history of racism in Val Dosta. She was an African American woman who lived in Brooks County, which is right near Val Dosta, during the early 20th century. In May 1918, a white mob lynched a black man named Sidney Johnson. Funnily enough, Johnson. Weird. Mary Turner, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, this was, I should mention, I found out after this, it was actually her husband. So Sidney Johnson was her husband. And I didn't put the two together because her name's Mary Turner. But she publicly denounced the lynching and threatened to have those responsible arrested. As in very similar to the witch trials, her outspokenness and defiance angered the white community, and in retaliation, a mob of white men targeted Mary. The exact details of her death are harrowing and disturbing. You have been warned. I will go through it as briefly as I can. But the mob kidnapped Mary Turner and took her to Folsom's Bridge, located near Morven, a small town, like I said, close to Val Dosta. There, they tied her upside down by her ankles and set her on fire. While she was still alive, this is awful. While she was still alive, they cut open her abdomen, causing her unborn child to fall to the ground. And the mob then stomped on the baby and obviously killed it. After this horrific act, Mary Turner's body was shot with hundreds of bullets and left hanging from a tree as a warning to other African Americans who dared to challenge the white supremacist order. There is now a big memorial plate dedicated to Mary Turner and her unborn child. In 1922, the KKK, or the Ku Klux Klan, was huge in Val Dosta. There's several photographs and there's just hundreds and hundreds of these twats. And in 2018, in a local restaurant called Jimmy John's, a video circulated the internet of staff at said restaurant in homemade KKK outfits being twats and saying, you know, meanwhile at Jimmy John's, and they're standing there dancing in these KKK outfits.
Not cool, guys.
Not cool. And on the anniversary of Mary Turner's death, her memorial was shot with bullets. So there's just so much racism still there and
changed, is it?
Disrespect. But today in Val Dosta, there's still a huge battle against black and white, and racism still remains on a massive level. So that gives you a bit of an understanding of the area. I was unaware of this. So when I found that out, I thought, now that kind of makes a bit more sense. These, you know, the people that are saying this was murder, I kind of get it from, you know, putting all the pieces together. You think, this actually stinks of racism. Now I'm going to give you some history on Kendrick. And I will be referring to him as KJ, as that's how he was known to his friends and family. KJ was a good kid. He was a brilliant basketball player. He loved sports and he loved school. He was 17 years old and an African American. He was super close to his family and he loved his dad. Everyone says he was super, super close to his dad. His dad, Kenneth, was a truck driver and spent a lot of time, sort of, you know, chunks of time away driving his truck. His mum, Jackie, along with Kenneth, had lived in Val Dosta their whole lives, and they had 5 children altogether. On January the 10th, 2013, KJ's family became worried when he didn't come home from school. His family all started calling each other, saying, have you heard from KJ? Have you seen him? But no one had. KJ's mum, along with his sister, drove back to the school and started driving around looking for him. They couldn't see anyone anywhere. They spoke to the bus driver, and the bus driver said, well, he wasn't on the bus this evening, so don't know where he is. On that evening, when it started getting dark, Jackie called the police and the sheriff came out and spoke to her, and he said to her, oh, he's probably just laid up with some girl. And she was like, nah, my kids know to be home after dark. You know, they know to come home. KJ knows to come home. If he has not come home, something's wrong. But the sheriff pretty much just sort of wrote a report and said, all right, well, I'll have a drive round and see if I can see him. But, you know, it's probably nothing. I wouldn't be too worried. KJ's dad, Kenneth, who was actually on a job driving his truck, said that when he spoke to Jackie and she said, oh, look, I've spoken to the police, I've told them that he hasn't come home, they think it's nothing. It started to approach midnight that night and they still hadn't heard from him. Kenneth said, I had to pull the truck over and go and lay on my little bed at the back. And he said, as I did, I knew that my son was dead. But I knew that I wasn't going to see my son again. The following morning, KJ's sister, Kenyatta, and mum went back to the school. They were there at 8 o'clock, searching the school, going around the school. They went into the school. They were looking in his classrooms, having a look round. And then later on in the morning, Kenyatta said that there was a lot of people around the old gym. And when Kenyatta went to the door, the police, and there was some officials there, I guess, like officials of the school, maybe some from the police department. But she said they just would not let her in. And she knew that there was something wrong because there were other students already in the gym. So why wouldn't they let her in? She went and told her mum. Her mum came to the gym, and her mum, Jackie, just went up to the sheriff and said, is that my son? Did you find my son? And the officer said, yes. Jackie broke down and was obviously absolutely devastated. Jackie then told Kenneth, who headed home immediately. There were a lot of students, as I said, already in the gym when they discovered KJ's body, and they said that when they pulled the gym mats down, you could see KJ's feet sticking out the top. And she said the smell was horrendous. At that point, they knew that one of their classmates was dead in the gym. Although this was now a crime scene, the school kind of carried on as normal. You've got KJ's mum, Jackie, who was sitting there screaming and crying outside the gym. And there was just hordes of children walking past her as she was sitting there, just going to their next class, like it was a normal day. The police came out the gym and said, unfortunately, KJ is dead. We've found him. We don't suspect any foul play. And the family thought, you've just found him. He's still in the gym. You haven't even taken his body out. He hasn't been examined.
For all they knew, he could have been shot.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
they had no idea, did they?
no, he could have been stabbed. He could have been strangled. They don't know that yet. So yeah, but already they were, you know, they were sure enough to make the statement of, we don't suspect any foul play.
They'd made up their mind, didn't
Yeah,
they?
yeah, it was just like,
From
yep,
that.
it's fine. You know what? Natural causes, idiots. So pretty quickly, the police ruled his death an accident. When KJ's autopsy came back, it said cause of death, positional asphyxia. So for those of you that don't know, positional asphyxia would be like in KJ's case, if you were trapped upside down in particular, it just means that all the fluids would go to the top half of your body. So your lungs would fill up with fluid, you would bleed, you would almost sort of drown within your own body. All the fluids would go to your head and your lungs, and so
your brain would swell and all that.
Yeah, so it's like saying that you basically you sort of suffocate. So asphyxia, you would suffocate because of the position that you're in.
Kendrick was found in the gym mats, wasn't he?
He
the
was.
rolled up gym mats.
Yeah, so he was upside down. So the family were in disbelief, to say the least. They began protests at the courthouse. They could not understand how this could be an accident. When he was discovered, he was head down in a rolled up gym mat. These gym mats are 6 foot tall, about 3 to 4 feet wide in total. There's a gap of about 14 inches in the middle, and he was stuffed down like in the middle of a toilet roll, if you can sort of picture that. So he was head down. He had one arm over his head and in a horrendous condition. His family began this protest at the courthouse. They couldn't understand how this could have possibly been an accident. He wasn't silly. He didn't do ridiculous things like, you know, thinking it was a good idea to go head down into a 6 foot tall gym mat. And they just couldn't understand how he could end up head down, upside down, in the middle of a gym mat, squeezed himself inside and just died. So I'll explain a little bit more about the gym mats in particular. So the kids at the high school didn't all have lockers. So they used to drop their gym shoes behind the gym mats. And originally I thought they used to put their shoes in the gym mats.
Yeah.
But after hearing a statement from several of KJ's schoolmates and friends, it turns out that they didn't do that. They used to throw their shoes behind the gym mats, and if any of the shoes had sort of gone, you know, they might have sort of thrown it and it bounced and it went down inside. They said, we would never have climbed. I mean, how can you climb up on top of a 6 foot gym mat anyway? But
well, they were all stacked together, and the one
standing
that he
up
was
like
in,
toilet rolls.
Yeah, the one that he was in, it was in the corner, wasn't it? Like up against the wall.
Yeah, they were all sort of in the corner, standing up like toilet rolls or whatever, you know, in the corner. And there was a sort of void behind where the gym mats were. That was kind of an empty space. So they all used to throw them over into the corner. But if they went down inside one of the gym mats accidentally, he said, we just used to push the gym mats.
Yeah.
And just push them and tilt them and either kick it out with your foot, or one of your mates would hook it out. Or failing that, if you were on your own and you thought, one of my shoes, I bet it's gone down inside that mat. He said, we just used to push them over.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that they are, at the end of the day, they're foam. I know they're heavy, but I mean, these are 17-year-old boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said, we would never have gone
down,
head down into him. He said that just wouldn't happen. So when they said that about KJ, I knew that was a lie, because he said KJ would never ever have done that.
Well, you wouldn't. Looking at the picture of all the mats rolled up together like that, if you went head down into that mat, There is absolutely no way you would get back out.
No way.
You just wouldn't.
The only way you would be able to do that is if the gym mats were about 2 foot high.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then, you know, because anything past your waist, you're never getting back out, are you?
Yeah. Once your arms and your shoulders are in, you've got nothing to get you out unless someone pulled your legs out.
Exactly.
There's no way you would attempt to get in there to retrieve your shoes if you could quite easily just push them over, which you can.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is, this is what KJ's friends said as well. They said, we've been putting our shoes there the whole time, like we've been at the school.
Yeah.
So, and he's never done that. He's never, he would never do that. It just doesn't make sense. Why would you climb in the top when you know that you could just push the mat over and
like you've done so many times before? Yeah. It's
not like he just, you know, it's the first time he'd ever done it and he thought, oh, I got confused. That wasn't the case. So none of this made sense to his friends, and obviously none of it made sense to his family. So as his dad, Kenneth, said, we had to make some noise because this was very quickly being brushed under the carpet. No, it was an accident. No. And his family were like, no, it was not an accident. So they linked arms outside the courthouse and refused to let anyone in until they made a scene, basically. So they ended up getting arrested, which is what they wanted. And they made a stand and they started this protest against sweeping everything under the carpet. So questions started being asked, and one in particular was circulating wildly. If this was a white kid that had been found dead, would it have been brushed under and labelled as an accident? Personally, looking at all the other evidence,
I know what the other evidence is. So I know that having all that evidence taken into account absolutely wouldn't have been swept under the rug. It would have been investigated a lot more, because there is a lot of he wasn't just found rolled up in the mat dead, reaching for his shoes. There's other.
There is. Let's go into it. Pretty much the whole investigation was ridiculous. When the police first looked at KJ, they unrolled him from the gym mat, checked him over, and then they re-rolled him in the mat to hand over to the coroner. And the coroner said, well, you've repositioned him. So that's not, I can't do a report on that because that's not true to how he was found. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Georgia law states that a coroner should be called as soon as a body is discovered. Like the second, like it should be their first call.
Yeah.
You find a body, call the coroner. The coroner then makes a report on what is found, what is seen, what is found, the condition of the body, the temperature of the body, time of death, cause of death. All of that is so important. The police called the coroner. Do you know how many hours after?
No,
5 hours.
Oh gosh.
5 hours after they found KJ, they called the coroner, and they'd already unrolled him from the gym mat, repositioned him. KJ's dad, he made like demands. I am going to see my son's body.
Yeah.
When he went to see his son's body, he said that if you go to a morgue, it's chilly.
Yes.
It's refrigerated. It's conserving the body, conserving any possible potential evidence. And he said when he went to see his son, it was warm in there. And when they unzipped the bag that KJ was laid in, he said there was almost a sort of puff of warm air that came out, that he thought, it's not like I've done this a lot. Yeah. But I remember it surprising me and thinking, why is he being kept in such warm conditions? I thought it had to be cool conditions.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he said that was bizarre. Bill Watson, who is Lowndes County, Georgia coroner, said that KJ's body had been moved and the scene had been compromised. and this was far from the usual protocol. So some evidence at the scene that was inconsistent, to say the least, was there were trainers at the scene that were not KJs, which you might say, yes, but the scene is where all these teenage boys kept their trainers.
Yeah.
However, they had a dried red substance on, and the police said, well, we didn't take them in as potential evidence because it wasn't blood that was on the trainers. Having learned about usual protocol for investigators, everything is taken into evidence.
Yeah.
Everything that is in that crime scene is logged and noted and put into evidence. These trainers that had this mysterious dried red substance on weren't taken into police evidence.
Were these the trainers that were found on top, like where his feet were? Or
no, they were found literally like next to where it all happened.
Okay.
But it should have been logged. It should have been taken in as potential evidence, and it wasn't. There was blood on the wall in the gym, near the gym mats, near where KJ's body was. Although it was tested to say, yes, it was blood, it wasn't tested to see whose blood it was, and it was not logged into evidence either. There was a second pair of trainers that were KJ's, which is the trainers that you're talking about, that were on top of KJ's feet. Yeah. Just kind of his legs were sort of at the side, leaning to the side of this inner tube, and they were kind of dropped down by his legs. Yeah. These were not the trainers that he was reaching for. These were the trainers that he wore to go to school in. I don't find this as bizarre, because I think what if potentially at some point he kicked his shoes off? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was in a panic to try and get out. I don't know, but I kind of thought, well, if he was upside down and he kicked his shoes off, then they probably would have fallen like down by his legs.
Yeah, I do disagree, because I think your training, I mean, how he's wedged in is his feet are about a foot from the top, so he's completely inside, isn't he? So yes. It's not like his feet are hanging out or anything like that. Trainers, if you're going to use the only thing that you can use, which is your feet to get you out, your trainers are going to do that better than your socks will. So I don't feel like he would have kicked his trainers off.
I mean, maybe he didn't do it intentionally. You know, I mean, there's nothing to say that they would. I mean, quite often they're not done up tight, are they? I mean, mine aren't. When I put my trainers on, I just literally like push my feet into them.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that he would have had to kick his trainers off while he was completely stuck in this tube. Like if he'd have kicked them off as he was going in, they wouldn't be in the mat with him. He would have already been completely in the mat before going, oh, I know what a good idea is while I'm stuck here, let me kick my shoes off.
Yeah, but it's going to be panic, isn't it? I don't know, unless
it is bizarre. It's one of those things, isn't it, where you don't know why they're there.
Maybe they thought if his trainers are on the floor next to the gym, if someone was trying to hide his, like,
they just threw them on top.
Maybe they just thought, hide his trainers, otherwise someone's going to look in the gym and see his trainers and go, oh, his shoes are over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it was that, but anyway, that's they were on top of where he was, which is a bit bizarre. There were another pair of trainers that were KJs, and they were in the bottom of the rolled up mat. So these were the trainers that the police say that he was reaching for. And the strange thing about these is that they were absolutely spotless. They were super, super clean. And this is strange because being at the bottom, KJ had unfortunately bled a lot. He'd also vomited quite a lot, but the shoes were on top of said blood and vomit. which is just,
I think we discussed it before,
strange.
didn't we? And we said that potentially he could have reached down and got the trainers and then had them in his hand and then gotten stuck and then, bled, whatever else. And then as he was dying, released the shoes and that they'd fallen on top.
Yeah. If you're my issue with that, because that was something that we spoke about, well, a year or more. Yeah. My issue with that is if you've got to the point where you are vomiting and bleeding a lot,
let go of the damn trainers.
You're not going to be hanging on to a pair of trainers, are you?
Yeah, and that's it as well. If you are stuck, you want to use your hands to try and, shimmy yourself back up. So you're gonna,
the moment you realised that you were stuck and you were in trouble, you're not going to be hanging on to the bloody trainers, are you? It's just
but again, it's very strange that his blood and everything was there and then the trainers were on top. Because how else do you explain that happening?
I know. I also struggle with that as well, because I'm like, okay, well,
if he was beaten and then put in there, they would have had to put him in there and then somehow get the trainers. It's strange.
I don't know. It's very, very weird.
Did you know you can help support our podcast and get additional content? Subscribe to our show for $3 a month or £2.39 if you're in the UK. And for your support, you'll receive 2 additional BLM episodes a month. Your subscription helps ensure Kate and I can keep bringing you great content every week. If you want to subscribe, just follow the link in the episode description. You'll also get a huge thank you and a shout out in the next episode. Blam over. Back to the episode.
But they also found a grey hoodie that had blood on it, and it was tested and it was definitely blood, and the hoodie was not KJ's, and also the blood was confirmed not KJ's. So there's a mystery hoodie. It's got mystery blood on it, and the hoodie was not put into evidence. What the actual fuck?
That's because they'd ruled it an accident, didn't they? So they went, oh, none of this matters because it was clearly an accident.
Nothing else in this gym or in the world matters. So it's an accident. So just pick him up and let's go. And that's pretty much like what it feels like they did. So, so as we said, the police were convinced that KJ had climbed into the mat to retrieve his shoes, got stuck and died. And if they weren't sure that this is what had happened, that's what they said anyway. So what was the reason? Anyway, so the next bit of evidence that they seem to have skipped over is the CCTV footage. So there are 4 cameras in that gym. There's cameras that cover like the whole of the school, but there's 4 cameras in the gym, and they cover the whole gym apart from the area where the rolled up mats are. And there's something really weird about this, and I'll give you the information and then I'll say why I think that this has happened. So one camera records, or camera 1 I'll call it. So camera 1 records the whole morning up until 12:04, and then it resumes at 1:09 p.m. So this is all that I'm talking about, the day that KJ dies. Camera 2 records the whole morning up until 11:05 a.m. It cuts out. It then resumes at 1:15 p.m. Camera 3, pretty much exactly the same as camera 2, records the whole morning up until 11:05, the same as camera 2, cuts out, resumes at 1:16 p.m. So they're cutting out and they're coming back on sort of, the around 1:09, 1:15. Camera 4, exactly the same as camera 1, records up to 12:04, then cuts out and resumes at 1:09. So cameras 2 and 3, exactly the same. Cameras 1 and 4, exactly the same. So the time that cuts out is when cameras outside the gym in the hallway record several males entering the gym. These cameras are motion sensors. So if the lights are on in the gym or if there's motion, they record, and they always do. Why didn't the cameras inside the gym pick up these males that were heading in? Because they were seen from the outside. But this is when we've got from about 11:05 to 1:15, there isn't really anything showing inside the gym. Well, there's nothing showing inside the gym. So we know from that from at least 12 to 1, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we know that there was several males students that went inside the gym. Then at 1:09 p.m, KJ is seen entering the gym. And this is the last time that KJ is seen on camera until his body is found and brought out. In the hours after this, the cameras go on and off with multiple people going in and out. None of the kids say they saw KJ climbing into the mats, struggling near the mats, trying to get shoes, shouting, nothing. No one says anything about it. Not even the discovery of KJ's body was on the tapes. So it's literally, it shows KJ going in the gym, running across the gym. And then the next thing that's on the video is his body being brought out. And that's it. So from that, it cuts out and then there's nothing. In June of that year, the Johnsons hired Dr. Bill Anderson to possibly look at doing a second autopsy. So like they just weren't getting anywhere with any of this. They thought it was so suspicious. They were convinced that he'd been murdered. So, I mean, it takes a lot for a parent to say, yeah, we want to exhume the body of our child. But that's what they looked into anyway. And Dr. Bill Anderson said that he would have a look at his original, KJ's original autopsy report. So when he examined the original autopsy report, Dr. Anderson found that, as we spoke about earlier, in positional asphyxia, the lungs fill with fluid and become very heavy. And on the report, he said, well, KJ's lungs are normal weight. And also, no fluid was detected in his lungs. And he thought, well, that absolutely cannot be positional asphyxia then. So he said, okay, based on that knowledge, we need to exhume KJ and carry out a second autopsy. So that's what they did. When Dr. Anderson started the second autopsy, he was horrified to discover that all of KJ's organs were missing. He found lots and lots and lots of balled up newspaper. And he said, this, in my career, this has never happened. During an autopsy, the organs are taken out, they're examined, put into bags, and then the bags are put back inside the body and then stitched up. Why had KJ's organs been taken?
To be stuffed with newspaper as well, it feels very deliberate.
It does.
Because if they've, put in bags and then maybe forgotten to be put back in or something, that's more understandable. But to stuff his body with rolled up newspaper to make it look like,
to fill
the cavity,
exactly.
That seems very, very deliberate.
Yeah, no, it's awful. So the morgue where the original autopsy was carried out said that KJ's organs were put back inside his body. His body was then released to the funeral home. Was his body tampered with at the funeral home, or is someone at the county morgue lying? Because somewhere along the road, his organs missing.
The funeral home would not have unstitched him. They would have no need to.
They wouldn't personally, but did someone get to the funeral home and say, you need to do this?
No, it's done at the morgue.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so too.
They ruled it as positional asphyxia,
Yes.
knowing that his lungs didn't show that. So
Yeah.
they're not gonna.
What
They're gonna
I'm
destroy that as
curious
soon as
about,
possible.
yeah, I mean, I think that his organs have gone missing because they're full of evidence. And I think that someone that was in the know would have said, look, if it's questioned and they do a second autopsy, they're going to see that his lungs are there. But the only thing that bugs me about that is, why put it in the report then? Why not say that, his lungs, yeah, or but why not say he died of positional asphyxia, his lungs weighed,
Yeah.
a ton,
and bodge that, yeah.
And do that as well. That I don't understand that. Why say that his lungs were normal weight and didn't contain any fluid, but then he died of positional asphyxia? It doesn't make sense, but very few bits in this case do make sense, to be honest. But Bill also found cuts and abrasions on KJ's hands, and a few on his face as well. And he said that's consistent with a fight. The cuts look like fingernail marks, and he said they were done. The cuts on his hands, in particular, were done very, very soon before his death. They're very open. They haven't had a lot of time to bleed. Definitely right before his death.
Didn't they find blunt force trauma to his neck as well?
Get into that.
Sorry.
So Bill's only option was to work with what he had, which was KJ's body, but without any of his organs. And it was literally from his neck to his pelvis. There was nothing. He looked over for, anything else that might have been overlooked. He found an area on KJ's neck that had huge bleeding, and it was around his carotid artery. And he said this was consistent with blunt force trauma. In his original autopsy report, it states that there was bruising on KJ's neck and lower jaw. From doing that second autopsy, obviously they weren't able to do a full autopsy. But he said with the cuts on his hands, abrasions on his face, this bruising on his lower jaw and neck, hemorrhage in there, just points to the fact that he looked like he was in a fight. A federal prosecutor called Michael Moore, who was investigating KJ's death, stated that he wouldn't rest until all these questions had been answered. And he stated this on television for everyone to see. 1, what was the cause of KJ's death? 2, was his death the result of a crime? 3, if it was, who committed the crime? And he said, quote, "I will follow the facts wherever they lead." And when KJ's family heard this, they thought, finally, we are going to get some justice for KJ. We're going to find out what really happened to him. And as the investigation began, there was one common fact that arose time and time again. And this was the Bell brothers. I'll give you some history on the relationship between KJ and the Bell brothers. A year or so before KJ's death, KJ had got into a fight with another student called Brian Bell. They were on a bus heading for a playoff game. And Brian was like the other guys on the bus, the other students on the bus said that Brian was playing kind of rough with KJ, and KJ wasn't about it. He wasn't playing back. He wasn't in the mood. He didn't find it funny. He was like, not cool, Brian. Not cool. But Brian then grabbed KJ by his dreads and kind of pinned his head down. And he was holding his head down and laughing, like proper bullying. Do you know what I mean? Just laughing at him. And KJ kind of pulled Brian's hands off his hair. And, KJ was obviously pissed by then. So a fight started. And there's no doubt about it. KJ beat Brian in this fight, and Brian was visibly pissed about it. But when they got off the bus, when they got to the game, KJ was made to sit in the police deputy's car for like the whole time, and they let Brian sit in the stands with his parents and watch the game. So like, what's that about? After this, KJ said that he would regularly see a student called Brandon staring at him, like just staring him out. And Brandon was going around the school saying that this fight between Brian and KJ was not over. Oh, and did I mention that Brandon is Brian's brother?
Did you mention as well that they are both white?
No, I didn't actually, but
no,
yes. Yeah, white boys. So Brian and Brandon, the Bell brothers, yes, they are white as white can be.
When you said that Kendrick was made to sit in the police and Brian was allowed to go and watch it, I thought, I bet that's the colour differential. You
can picture it, can't you?
Yeah.
Like Brian sitting with his parents, sort of saying about how embarrassed he is, and he's anyway. So Brandon had been going around the school saying, it's not over, Brian and KJ are gonna fight again and all this. And one day KJ called his dad and said something really weird happened today at school. Rick Bell, who is Brian and Brandon's dad, came up to me and said, that fight you had on the bus was unfair. You should come over to our house and refight him. And KJ's dad was like, what did you say? And he said, I just looked at him like he was crazy and walked away.
Crazy.
He was like, it was obvious that Brian's dad was pissed that his son had lost a fight. Oh, and also I should mention that a little bit about Rick Bell, the Bell brothers' dad. Yeah, he was an FBI agent.
Oh, I was going to say to you,
that's what he did for a living.
Yeah, what students at the school had a dad or family member that worked in law enforcement? I was going to ask that.
Yeah, there was a few of them actually. There was a couple of the white students that went to the school whose dads were in the FBI.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Yeah, so just let that sink in for a minute. You've got an FBI agent saying to a 17-year-old kid, you should come to our house and refight my son.
Yeah.
And he's talking to a black 17-year-old. Like, what was he thinking?
Yeah.
What an idiot to do that and say, yeah, that fight you had with my son, that was an unfair fight. What was unfair about it?
Yeah. That his son lost.
Yeah. And the fact that he's willing to put his own son back into another fight yeah. And like potentially his son could get really badly hurt. And he's like, come round to our house and fight my son. Obviously, Rick Bell denies that this conversation ever happened. The police then interviewed Brian Bell and they spoke to him, obviously, more about the day KJ died. Brian stated he was nowhere near KJ and didn't see him at all of that day. And then, all of a sudden, the whole Bell family lawyered up. Strange that. And then something really weird, something even more weird or just as weird. All the witnesses, when they were talking to the investigators, said, why do I keep getting questioned by FBI agent Rick Bell? And the investigators were like, huh? Why is he questioning you? And the FBI went to Rick Bell and they said, listen, you cannot be involved in this case. Yeah. Like, we're questioning your sons about it. You cannot do that. You cannot go and speak to the witnesses. And he was like, oh, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, whoops. The investigators who, when they spoke to the witnesses, they said they weren't directly threatened, but they felt threatened. They said that Bell it wasn't, it's like, it's not what you said, it's how you said
it.
It was exactly like that. So they
Yeah.
said that Bell was speaking to them in a threatening manner. And also Bell was like turning up at witnesses' places of work. And some of them, he was literally just like standing outside.
Waiting
Like,
for him.
yeah, like across the street, you know, and they'd be sort of going about their, you know, business, and they'd look out and be like, Rick Bell's over the street bogging at me through the window. And it was just weird. He was just like lurking outside their places of work, outside their homes, things like that. And on July 21st, 2015, just after 5 a.m. in the morning, the FBI raided the Bell's house. And I didn't go too much into, you know, what they found. It's quite difficult to find what came of that. But they said FBI raided Bell's house on the 21st of July around 5 a.m. Because it was on the news. It was all over the telly. It was all on the news. So that's kind of how we sort of found out about it. The thing about this that speaks the loudest is, in order to have a raid done and to get a warrant to search property, a judge has to sign off on that. So what did they have? What evidence did they have? They can't just go, well, their kid's fought on a bus.
Yeah.
What did they have that they showed the judge, that the judge went, yes? And this was a big raid. It was a big raid. There was big armored vehicles, many, I don't know how many officers were there, but I mean, they were armed. They had guns and everything, and they raided this house at 5 o'clock in the morning.
What were they looking for, though?
Don't know.
Because if you're a suspect in a murder, you generally don't get a house raid.
They took hard drives, they took phones, they took computers. So it seemed to be a lot of sort of digital stuff. They took cameras, things like that. So I think maybe they were looking for signs of like any kind of conversation about it, or maybe conversations between them and friends of like, we're gonna, you know, we'll get KJ in the gym tomorrow, or I don't know. But
and that at that time as well, it was also, if somebody was having a fight, it would have absolutely been filmed.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a fight in the gym.
Yeah. And also don't forget that by this time they kind of were under a large amount of suspicion that the CCTV in the gym had been tampered with. Yeah. So it's possible maybe they might have been looking for the missing bits of the video. When they asked Brian Bell, who was the one that had the fight, when they asked Brian if he had anything to do with KJ's death, Brian said, quote, "No, he was one of my good friends."
Oh, that's a bit of a lie, isn't it?
I mean, that's not true, guy. How can you say, oh, he was one of my good friends?
Just throws even more suspicion in his direction, really, doesn't it?
Exactly. Michael Moore, who was the lead guy, he subpoenaed more than 120 students to testify in front of a grand jury. And I am going to read you one statement from one of the students. And obviously there's bits of it that are redacted. So you may all draw whatever conclusions you want. Quote, "My best friend was at a party Saturday night with blank, and blank was upset about something that blank had said to her. So her and my best friend started talking, and by the end of the night, blank had told my friend everything that the whole nation has been wondering about for the past year. She told my friend what really happened to KJ. Blank said that about a little over a year ago, she had had sexual intercourse with KJ while she was dating blank. Blank found out about it and threatened KJ. KJ told blank to meet him in the old gym after 3rd block, and he would have his knife ready. Blank and blank, who had just transferred back to LHS, met KJ and killed him. Blank has also been heard admitting to killing KJ more than once over the phone. His brother, blank, also got drunk at a party on the 4th of July and told many people that blank killed KJ and that he, blank, was tired of keeping it a secret. End quote. When I first read that, I thought that they were definitely talking about Brian and Brandon.
That is what it sounds like.
It does. However, when it says blank and blank who had just transferred back to LHS, that doesn't fit with Brian and Brandon. I think they may have been talking about someone else. But, I mean, doesn't look like an accident.
No.
And if you think it's murder, you need to find out who murdered him. Then, in November 2015, Michael Moore, who had previously said, I will not rest until these questions have been answered, he resigned all of a sudden out of the blue. And he was the person that had put the Bell brothers at the top of the investigation. Then, shortly after this, KJ's case was moved to Ohio. And this meant the investigation was being dealt with by, you know, in a totally different state with totally different investigators. And nobody knew why. There was no reason for it. Absolutely no reason. It was just like, well, because the FBI stated to the Johnson family that they knew KJ had been murdered. They knew it wasn't an accident, but they didn't have enough evidence to support it. And this was their exact words. We don't have enough evidence to support murder. So they did have some evidence.
Yeah.
What was it? What was the evidence that they had that they wouldn't share, that they had that pointed to murder? Because it's just, you can't be like, we suspect murder.
Yeah, they've got some evidence, but not quite enough.
You've got some. So there will be more. You know, if you've got some evidence that it was murder, if you look deep enough, you will find something. I know you will. I don't know how long it will take, but just anyway. The Department of Justice, or DOJ, got the Johnson family for a meeting, and they said there was like Kenneth Johnson and Jackie Johnson, KJ's mum and dad, and there was about 8 of them from the DOJ. And they said the shoe inside the gym mat was planted there. We know that. There's no way that it could have been an accident. I'm thinking maybe someone tilted the mat and put a shoe under there and said, we'll make it look like he was reaching for his shoes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's possible. But the DOJ said, we know that that shoe was planted there. They said that they knew KJ was killed and it wasn't an accident, but they couldn't prove it. After this happened, not just like 1 or 2, 7 judges recused themselves from KJ's case. And I had to look up what recused mean, because I thought, never heard of that. It means that a judge wants to remove themselves from the case. They feel that they cannot be fair or unbiased, and they don't want to be involved in that case.
Oh.
And that happened 7 times.
That
7 judges.
Sounds.
What was going on behind the scenes?
That sounds like a very a powerful man has got some influence somewhere.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
And he's pulling strings.
It does. What was happening behind the scenes for 7 judges to not want to be involved in that case? And why did Michael Moore suddenly resign?
Yeah.
He was all in. He was like, I'm ready to go. I'm going to take these people down. He subpoenaed over 120 students and parents, because obviously they were all like underage, but he had to subpoena all those people.
Yeah, I think there's probably an element of blackmail.
Yeah, I think black is the operative word, isn't it?
Yeah.
The investigators in Val Dosta were looking at Rick Bell and his sons, and whilst doing this case, it was moved to Ohio and the case was closed. It was named or it was labelled as accidental death, and it was closed.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Johnson family were like, nope. So they said, we have to find more evidence. So unfortunately, they decided to do a third autopsy. So on November 15th, 2018, 5 years after KJ's death, his body was exhumed for a second time. They found that it was blunt force trauma to his neck and his chest. KJ had a huge hemorrhage, which proves blunt force trauma. The third autopsy was ruled non-accidental death. Cause of death was blunt force trauma. They filed these results with the authorities and were told, sorry, we're not interested. The case is closed. The FBI report on the CCTV was lost. So it was not available to anyone. And the family again was like, nope, we're gonna see if we can get this sorted. And it was actually, ironically, it was a team of filmmakers that were making a documentary about KJ that found this report. And obviously, because it was footage that was being prepared to potentially use in court, a lot of it had been redacted. A lot of it, you know, the students had been blacked out so that you couldn't, you know, see all these people that weren't involved. So they thought, well, we kind of want to see the real footage. We want to see the bits that have been redacted. So unbelievably, they found it, and they found the most incredible piece of evidence. Guess who they saw walking next to KJ moments before he entered the gym and died? Do you
I
want
want to say one of the Bell brothers, Brian.
Spot on. Brian Bell. You can clearly see Brian Bell walking alongside KJ moments before he enters the gym. And I'd just like to remind everyone, in case you've forgotten, in Brian Bell's statement, he said, I hadn't been anywhere near KJ that day and I hadn't seen him at all.
Yeah.
And this is the
That's
same.
a lie.
Yeah, that's a lie. This is the same Brian Bell who said that KJ was a good friend of his. The same Brian Bell whose father was an FBI agent, same Brian Bell who had a fight with KJ publicly on a bus and was shamed. KJ was a notable figure in Brian Bell's life. I'm pretty sure he would remember walking alongside him.
Yeah.
Liar. So when this evidence was shown to the investigators from Val Dosta, who had been shut out of the case, they're the ones that had, you know, been desperate to find evidence and get justice for KJ. They were shown this evidence like all these years later, and they said, not at any point had I been shown this video. I never knew. You know, we had Brian Bell sitting in front of us saying, I didn't see him at all that day. I was nowhere near the old gym. I was nowhere near KJ. Didn't see him. If we'd have seen that evidence, it would have pointed directly towards suspicion on the Bell brothers, 100%. So why did Brian Bell lie and say that he hadn't seen KJ all that day? When they examined the description of the CCTV, because all points of it are noted, you know, in this section at this time, this is what happened. It even says KJ observed in covered walkway moving towards camera. Bell observed in the same location at this time. Why was that not put into evidence? Why was that held from all the investigators? It's a pivotal part of the investigation. Rick Bell was fired from the FBI.
Oh.
To this day, no one has been charged with KJ's murder. And yes, I'm calling it a murder because I just cannot see it as an accident.
Yeah.
I think it's clearly and obviously a murder.
Yeah, I've just found a petition.
Yes.
And it's about the corruption of the police and the investigation.
Yes.
And I will read this little bit out to everybody.
Okay.
And it says it was started by Jessica Brooks, and it says, I went to Lowndes High School in Val Dosta with Kendrick's older sister. And then it says, so she obviously knows of the story quite well. And it says, I recently became aware of a statement made in Florida in 2017 by Ryan Hernandez. He was or is still friends with Brandon Bell. So Brandon Bell is the brother of Brian Bell and the son of former FBI Special Agent Rick Bell. Mm-hmm. His statements declare that Brian Bell killed Kendrick Johnson and Ryan Hall was with Brian Bell at the time. It states that Brian called his father, who worked for the FBI at the time. It also states that former FBI Special Agent Rick Bell called Sheriff Chris Prine after being made aware of Kendrick's death, and they then proceeded to cover it up. Not only cover up a crime, but they went so far as to remove Kendrick's organs and stuff him with newspaper to help cover their tracks.
It's disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I 100% believe that.
Yeah.
I honestly do. And there are some small ways that we can make a difference. If you guys go to Justice for Kendrick Johnson 17, so 17, the number, .org, and help if you can by, making a small donation to the cause. And also if you go to Facebook, Justice for Kendrick Johnson, and just show your support, because Kendrick Johnson's life matters and we need to do something about it. So even if we're just showing our support and showing that we're behind them and we're in pursuit of the truth, it helps to have a big lot of support. So even if each one of us that listens to our podcast and has listened to this, and thank you for staying all the way through to the end, and I'm glad I didn't have an absolute meltdown, but
another Matthew Shepard.
Yeah, I'm close to it, and I am super passionate about this, and I really want us to continue looking into this. So, Sarah and I will continue to follow this case, and we'll bring any updates to you guys if we find it. And similarly, if any of you guys listening, if you've got any more information on this or anything that we didn't mention, please send it to me, because I would love to hear it. And if there's anything we can do to help, let us know.
I have just thought as well about something that the Johnson family did as well to try and kind of prove that Kendrick couldn't have gotten into that rolled up thing by himself.
You're talking about his dad?
His dad, yeah. So the rolled up mats, they had a band around them to keep them rolled up. And then the opening at the top was proven that it was too small for Kendrick to have gotten in. His shoulders would not have fitted, whether it was one arm up, one arm down. His shoulders would not have fitted in that mat. His dad got in to prove that there was no way he could have got in. He was put in there and rolled up. He wouldn't have been able physically to climb in and get stuck how he was stuck.
I believe that as well. And I think, if they'd have looked at phone records, the chances are I think they probably had a fight, and I think Brian probably took something like a baseball bat or something like that he hit Kendrick with. I think they rolled him up in a mat, because I think Brian phoned his dad and said,
so what do I do?
What do I do? And he said, roll him up in a mat, put a shoe under there, and we'll say that he was climbing in the mats to get the shoe. That is what I believe. And it would be really interesting if you guys let us know what you think.
The links that Kate mentioned we'll put in the show descriptions.
Yes, definitely. Black Lives Matter. We'll follow this up with a BLM discussion, maybe, if we can get some people involved and get some more information, updates, anything like that. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.